Everyone in the chat room, please type your questions. You'll be first to go. And by the way, John, people can join us midstream, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. Okay, we're 1 minute out. It's 4 o'clock, and we shall begin. Eskin, on behalf of Eskin Fundraising Training, it's my pleasure to welcome you to our 4th Nonprofit Empowerment Webinar. And I was thinking how to open, and I'm sorry, everything you now sounds like a cliche. And we know that our parents and grandparents were tested by 2 world wars, were tested by a Great Depression, but we find ourselves probably tested in a much more profound way. And I gotta tell you, Marv and I, who I'll introduce in a second, I mean, we love serving the nonprofit sector because we know how big an oar the nonprofit sector pulls. And the nonprofit sector is going to need even to pull harder in that oar. So we want to thank you for joining us today, but more importantly, thank you for your service to your community and the world. We need you more than ever, and it is a real privilege to have 100 of you joining us this afternoon. Before we get any further, I'd like our producer, John Largent, who's CEO of Game Day Media. He and I have become very close in the last couple of weeks, and I want to thank him for his indispensable role in making these webinars possible. And John, can you just take a second to review some housekeeping notes and particularly how people can type in comments and questions?
Yeah, absolutely, Jim. Just want to let everybody know that this is a webinar that is being done through Wi-Fi, so you may experience different levels of lagging from time to time. We hope that doesn't happen, but it could, and we're aware of that. But when you'll be receiving a link to the recording that should be lag-free, and you'll have access to that within 24 hours. I also want to let you know that if you have any questions, that you can go to the bottom of your screen where it says Q&A and just type in that question. And when Jim asks for those at the end of the webinar, we will read those, and he or Marv will respond. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, John. And I'll tell you, he's going to get a fuller introduction in a bit later, but I would just want to introduce Marv LeRoy, who is in Clinton Park, that's upstate New York. Thomas Jefferson said, to be a leader, you have to have both a knowing head and an honest heart. And it is such a great privilege to call Marv both a good friend and a colleague. And I don't know anybody who's got a more knowing head and a more honest heart. And I want to welcome you, Marv. You're going to get a fuller introduction a little later into the show. But I actually, Marv, you want to say hello?
Yeah, and I don't know that I need any more introduction. What's better than being compared to Thomas Jefferson?
Well, actually, I have a surprise question for you. Part is Marv has served the nonprofit sector for close to 40 years. And during that time, he has raised close to $500 million for causes. Marv, here's the surprise question.
Okay.
Marv LeRoy number is larger, the number of dollars raised or your frequent flyer miles?
I think they're both in the same range.
He's a road warrior, but
yeah.
I wanted to start with this. Growing up in the 60s, John F. Kennedy was my hero. And there were so many things that I admired about him. And particularly, he excited a whole new generation about something he called public service. And that's giving back, actually giving back to the world through the Peace Corps. He also had a gift for finding words to precisely express important thoughts. And these are words from his June 10th, 1963 commencement address at an American university. And they give me goosebumps because I have the feeling that he is speaking to us right at this very moment. And he said, our most basic common link is that we all inhabit the small, we all breathe the same air, we all cherish our children's future, and we are all mortal. I mean, those words hit me, profound meeting. They do give me goosebumps. A time of great challenge, and there are many heroes around us. We know the first responders are in our hospitals and in the fire and police departments, but also there are frontline people who every day are giving us the necessities of life, and that's the people working in the grocery stores and the pharmacies, the many people that are delivering all the necessities to us. But I'd like to count everybody in the nonprofit sector. You are a hero too. And I don't have to remind you, this is a time where if you're in a nonprofit organization, you're faced with this dilemma, that needs are rising at the exact same time that your resources are being challenged. And we're going to talk how you can continue to raise money. And that's why Marv LeRoy is our subject matter expert today. By the way, there are about 1.5 million nonprofits in the country. There's 100,000 in Texas, more than 6,000 in San Antonio. There is no part of the quality of life that you all nonprofits do not enhance, enrich, and add value to. And again, I see it, you were needed before, and you're going to be needed more than ever as we meet and overcome this crisis. This is something we introduced a few shows ago. This is a graphic developed by my wife, Andrea. And if you could do me a favor, I'd like you to type into the screens, we're nonprofit strong, and I want you to feel that spirit, and I want you to embrace that thought, and I want you to celebrate it. Could you type into the screen, we're nonprofit strong. We're nonprofit strong. Do we have some folks typing that in?
We do.
Good.
Absolutely.
Well, one of the things that Marv and I want to tell you today, you and your nonprofits, you serve profoundly important missions. This is not the time to let up, or to say, to use a illustration, it's not the time to take your foot off the gas pedal. And we're going to talk about how you can continue to communicate, to cultivate, to solicit and steward your donors. This is a part of a series, but next week we have Melissa Brown, who's, I think, the best philanthropic economist statistician for 10 years. She was the editor of Giving USA. She's partnered with me before, and we're going to be lining up these programs for the rest of the year. I like Wednesdays between 4 and 5 p.m. By the way, too, we like to embrace the concept of learning community. Marv and I know a lot of things, but we know you all in the audience know a lot too. And what we like to do is bring all our wisdom together. And as my lifelong friend Chuck Posner likes to say, the answers are almost always in the room. And I think within our live workshops and now our digital webinars, that there's no question that we can't answer. And I got a first question. We're now planning future webinars. We would like to know what topics you would like to be addressed in future programs. And so if you would like it to be broadly on the subject of discovery, type in A, cultivation, type in B, solicitation, type in C, and finally stewardship, type in D. John, we getting some responses?
Mm-hmm.
Yes, we are. And we're getting A, D, C, B, all of them, C, D, D, D. Yes, lots of
I don't
Ds.
know, Marv, sounds like my report card.
Lots of Ds.
I just want to take a second. For those of you who don't know me, I had a wonderful 25-year career in higher education advancement, working for higher education institutions in the San Antonio area. And then in May of 2018, Andrea and I decided to pursue a dream that combined two passions. Passion number one, to do something on my own, but passion number two, to help nonprofit, particularly volunteers and board members, to overcome their fear of asking for a gift and to replace fear with confidence and comfort in raising money for the noble missions that they serve. I like to say that fundraising is a science, and you can break it into 4 distinct phases, and we're going to take a much closer look at how you can carry them out during COVID-19 with Marv. First is identifying who we're going to ask. Number 2 is forging a personal and emotional link between the donor prospect and our mission. The third is, and that's the when, the where, the how, the who, the how much ask for. And finally, the loop closes with stewardship, because we're going to thank and acknowledge him, because Marv, we want to come back next year and ask him to give again and consider to ask him to give more. A lot of people say they're afraid of asking for a gift. That's kind of human nature. But the truth is that asking for the gift is just a single moment in the gifting continuum. And a lot has to happen before that. And if you do that 90% well, actually the asking for the gift is pretty easy. But if you don't do that part that precedes the ask well, I don't care how good of a solicitor you are. Wanted to tell you, American philanthropy has been amazingly resilient over the last 60 years. It hit $428 billion last year, a record. And I know there's a lot of concern about giving capacity, but we wanted to point out some very positive indicators that we have. Number one, if we know anything from the last couple of decades, giving follows the stock market, and it's been remarkable how much the stock market has been holding up. I only wish I had invested in Zoom stock about a year ago. That's a different issue. And then we have some surveys, the BBUI's Giving survey donors, in which close to a third crisis and give more. Charitable survey and found 3 out of 4 of their donors plan to give more or the same. By the way, donor advised funds, which are the most dynamic and fastest growing part of philanthropy, they're way up. And last year they hit a record, Marv, what was it, 763 billion, and they were way up over last year. Finally, we're seeing some huge gifts. The founder of Twitter, Jack Dorsey, has pledged $1 billion. That's with a B. And we are here in San Antonio. We're very excited. Our friend Harvey Najam just stepped forward to give $500,000. That was matched by the Santigos Fund. And that brings, it's something called the Nonprofit Response Fund. And that's being managed by the San Antonio Area Foundation to provide grants to nonprofits, and now that fund is totaling $5.3 million. So there are funds available. That's a good sign. I wanted to just share this. I know we love foundation and corporate money, but for the last 60 years, that overwhelming share that goes to individual at around 65 to 70%. So I like to say you should go fishing where the fish are biting, and that's in the pool of individual donors. Also, we know that the mega donors are taking more and more, a greater percentage. You know, there used to be an 80-20 rule. Marv, do you know where the 80-20 rule is from?
I don't remember.
Oh, good. That's the first time I ever heard him said that. There was a Pareto. And in 1906, he went into his garden and he took a look at the pea pods and the peas. And guess what? 80% of the peas came from 20% of the pods. Then he studied who owned the land in Italy. And guess what? 20% of the landholders owned 80% of the land. And that was the origins of the 80-20 principle, which is held out that usually there's that relationship between inputs and outputs. And that applied in philanthropy until the last couple of years. And now it's even tilted where 12% of donors account for 88% of that $428 billion of giving last year. Marv is a ferocious advocate for campaigns or major gifts, and here you see why. It is by far the most productive and efficient way to raise money, and he's going to talk in detail about that. Can we fundraise from home? Marv, what were you just saying? What was your expression?
I was saying that, you know, old guys like us who've been in the game a long time learned right when we were pups that you don't raise any money from behind a desk. Well, we're all challenging that notion in this moment, so for sure.
We sure are. We sure are. And I want to take a couple of minutes to talk about a 4R strategy in nonprofit to COVID-19. The first was rapid, and I didn't know that. But anyways, we don't need more. The first one is rapid. Jim goofed in loading the slides, and that means if not already, nonprofit boards and staff should be having Zoom or audio conference calls. And we realize it's challenging to be rapid because there's more that you don't know than what you do know. But what you do know is how COVID-19 is impacting your nonprofit, and you should be sharing that with your donors and stakeholders as much as you can, as quickly as you can. Second R is relationship, and this is a time to approach your major gift donors. Every organization will define a major gift donor with a different number. Sometimes it might be $25,000. Sometimes it might be $25 million. You should be going to your inner circle, and I'm going to borrow an expression from Mr. LeRoy, who told me, you know, you should call your major gift donors with a line like this: we could not imagine facing a moment in history like this without turning for you for your input and for your philanthropic vision and leadership, and ask for a specific amount. This is to the family. And in general, treat your donors like family. I know what you did today. You're speaking to your siblings, your cousins, other immediate family members, close friends. And what do you say? How are you doing? You tell them you're doing, how you're doing. That's what we should be doing with our donors, because we should treat them like family. And there's rapid. Hey, Marv, guess who put it in the wrong order? Boo on Jim. And finally, what we know, there is tremendous resiliency in the nonprofit sector. You're no strangers to challenge. You've had to fight with budgets being reduced. You've had to fight with different environmental conditions, and you know how to stretch nickels into dimes, and you've proved yourselves to be resilient. It's my pleasure now to introduce Marv LeRoy. And Marv has served the nonprofit sector for about 40 years. We had the pleasure of meeting about 10 years ago when we were both focused on community college fundraising. And in 2015, Marv took the exciting and bold step of founding the Institute for Philanthropic Wisdom and Experience and Advice Council to organizations, particularly smaller and mid-sized nonprofits that previously could not afford such expertise. And what he has accomplished since 2015 amazes me. He has built a network of more than 40 associates who support the success of more than 100 nonprofits. Particularly, he's opened the door to campaigns, which again, we're going to talk about, is by far the most productive and efficient way of raising money. And again, I can't just say, I think I know something about fundraising. but Marv is my first phone call when I have a question. And Marv, I can't tell you how much Andrea and I appreciate your friendship and calling you a very close colleague. So could you take a moment, tell us, this is his mantra, more money, more mission. Just take a minute to tell us about the Institute.
Well, it is, as you expressed, amazing what we have been able to accomplish in a relatively short period of time. I think we all knew intuitively the need existed. There are some studies out there that say that there may be as many as 2 million nonprofits when you start counting, all the tiny small ones that emerge in communities when moments arise and people decide to go that route. If you're somebody who's contemplating starting a nonprofit, it'd be a struggle to do that right now. The IRS and other groups that sit in judgment of those incorporations are discouraging them. They're trying to promote a time of merger, acquisition, affiliation, because there's just so much competition out there. The other thing is that for those of you who have been in the position of having to find fundraisers, there just are not enough to go around, and it's a very competitive time. That's not going to go away anytime soon. The movement towards securing more resources is going to be ever present. And the other thing I'm reminded, and we've heard a lot we've got a lot of phone calls last month, especially from organizations who we've been in contact with over the last few years. Some new people who are finding us, and 90% of the project partners that we take on come to us by direct referral. We don't go to conferences, and there's just no need to do that. There's people are finding us, but what they're looking for now are new ways of going about their business. It's not just campaigns, although we are big supporters of the idea of campaigns. Jim, the previous session that we did in a webinar was on turning the pyramid on its point. You don't need to earn your way to campaigns anymore. The idea that you have to have vibrant annual funds and special events and kind of work your way to get to that point is no longer true. Organizations are using campaigns to go the other way.
Hey, Marv, we hear the word pivot. Of course, there's so many words we hear a lot. We heard the word pivot a lot these days.
Yeah.
And that's the need for nonprofits to be flexible in responding to obviously vastly different and constantly changing environmental conditions in the world around them. How do you recommend that nonprofit leaders make prudent decisions in revising their strategies and tactics?
Yeah. When isn't that the case in our world? I was joking the other day in a conversation. It's in moments like this where people in our professions really are respected, and people really understand value of what we bring to our organizations. When budgets get tight and conditions become more challenging, it's the fundraisers who are asked to step up and help organizations find their way through these moments. But we're dealing with a virus right now. Hopefully this is going to be a few more months at most, and we'll move on. It's a moment in time, but we've been through that before. For those of us who've been in the game for any length of time, we went through the Great Recession not that long ago. We've had moments in time that have really required us to step up and to be ready. And we talk about, we do a lot of strategic planning. We don't even use the word planning anymore. We use strategic positioning. What you're trying to do in your organization is to make sure that when a moment arises, whether it's a great opportunity or a challenge that you have to meet, you want to be well positioned to pivot, to move quickly and take advantage of the moment. And obviously that's some terminology that's now being used a lot, because we all want to position ourselves, and a lot of what we'll talk about when you look at the COVID-19 moment and where you are in the different stages of whether formal campaigns or just your work every day along that fundraising cycle, you need to determine what you can do now successfully and with some volume to position your readiness for when it's time to get back at it. So that's really, I think, where the concept of pivoting comes from right now.
Very good. Okay, let's move on. Discovery, we know that the gifting process begins with the identification of those most likely to give to our cause. What are your suggestions for the discovery phase?
Well, as you've already pointed out, almost 70%, and actually, if you include the family foundations, which are in the foundation category of that pie chart, back in individuals, because those are individual family members. Some people will say that that number of individuals in philanthropy is 75 to 80%. So obviously, we need to pay attention to people, and we need to pay attention to building relationships with more and more people. So the idea that we need to continue to look and examine those relationships that we either have in place or that we have the potential to develop out never goes away. Jim, you and I were talking the other day about how that idea of discovery should also be a time where right now, maybe we have a little bit more time because there's some things we just simply can't do. It's a time to also discover yourself, to discover the culture of philanthropy that you've built up in your organization. Have you done enough to make sure that your board and your leaders are fully on board with what you're trying to do? Are they participant enough? Have you really focused attention on people enough? And remember, we talk about corporations and foundations and things other than individuals. Those giving opportunities, they're people too. Those companies just have a company name, but you're not dealing with the company. You're dealing with people who work for that institution. So you're always building relationships. So discovery.
Great point.
Really,
by the way, this is a little formula. When you normally think of CIA, what do you think of, Marv?
Well, the CIA.
Central Intelligence Agency. Yeah. But we like to think of capacity, and that's their financial ability to support philanthropy or your cause. And that's usually the obvious one people think about first. Inclination, even if they have money, why do you think they'd be interested in your nonprofit? And even if you can establish capacity, inclination, you need access. You need a board member, a friend, a donor that can connect you with people who are probably incredibly busy and hard to reach.
Well, the capacity piece you can also deal with in an external environment. You can hire people to help you determine that. The other two, it's really on you. You have to bring them closer to your organization, work hard to connect them, integrate them into your programs and different things that the organization is involved with. Access is about 6 degrees of separation. You've got to have, the board members need to be connected to social and corporate circles and civic circles in the community. You need people in the right places to help connect you every day.
That's so true. And we like to remind board members, you can play a huge role in securing a gift without ever making an ask. And a big way is like breaking the ice or opening the doors, or I guess now opening the doors virtually. Right.
Yeah. And I get this question all the time when we start talking about campaigns. Board members who aren't comfortable asking for money, being the frontline solicitor, I tell them, I'm not going to ask anybody to do something they're not comfortable with and feeling a high level of competence. We don't need everybody to be the voice asking, I'd like you to consider making a gift of X for Y. That's actually the rare person on a board or even in a campaign committee. There's plenty of roles, and this cycle, it really goes to show that everybody can cultivate, everybody can steward. That's one of the great things that I love to have board members do is get on the phone and just call people and say thanks. And that's something in this moment, especially, when are we reminded more so than now how much we love and appreciate our donors? Yeah. The fact that we built relationships with those folks who have made previous gifts are stepping up right now in this moment to help us with a difficult time. We haven't had a higher level of appreciation for those folks than we have right now. And we should say thank you as much as we can.
Yeah, well, on that, we've moved to a virtual world in which video conferencing has become the new normal. What does it take to make virtual cultivation and stewardship more effective?
Yeah, cultivation and solicitation both fall into this category. I can't believe what now constitutes a close enough moment, a personal enough moment when you can use Zoom or BlueJean or Skype or whatever your favorite online virtual meeting platform is this is considered a personal conversation now when you can look someone in the eye in a computer screen. 6 months ago, I don't think too many fundraisers would have agreed that that's true. But as I shared just the other day, I've been a part. I still have 4 active campaigns going on. One, I usually carry 5 of my own. A 5th one went into pause mode because they're just at a place in the campaign where it didn't make any sense to ask for money right now. But the other 4 are actively out there. We're making asks. In the last 2 weeks, we've had 4.
Let's hold on that.
Let's
hold on in that. On solicitation, pardon me for butting in.
No,
you
fine.
Even told me about successes in the virtual solicitation of, get this, $1 million gifts.
Yeah.
What's it? So our question is, people are listening, what does it take for a virtual solicitation to be successful?
More than anything else. And it will be interesting to see if this, this usage of online platforms is considered personal when we move beyond COVID-19 and the inability to gather and be face-to-face. So that school's still out in that regard. For those of us like myself who are older, old school thinkers, old timers, we're itching to get back out there and do it the way we were taught and learned how to do it well. But I do think that more of this type of cultivation and ultimate solicitation will take place. The most important thing when it comes to the ask, especially significant ask, and I was referencing that in the last 2 weeks, we've done 4 7-figure solicitation asks on Zoom. And 3 of the 4 have said yes to the exact number asked for, and the 4 have said, I need to talk to advisors. And they're also saying to us, thank you for giving me the chance to do something special in this time when people are telling me to sit home and do nothing. So it's rather remarkable what we're learning from the process. But the most important thing is strong relationships with the people that you have the ability to reach out to now, which only goes to prove the point that when you're looking at discovery and you're looking at cultivation, we should always be cognizant of the fact that building those relationships is going to pay dividends over and over and over again in the best of times and the worst of times. And your work over previous months and years and decades in some cases, right now in this moment, is bearing fruit, because those are the people we're calling up and asking for 6- and 7-figure gifts from. And they're saying yes.
Hey, Marv, earlier we talked about donor advised funds being such a dynamic component of our business.
Right.
And again, last year alone, Fidelity Charitable made over $7 billion in grants, and they're way up this year.
Right.
How do you recommend our nonprofit friends tap into that enormous pool of donor advised funds?
Yeah, I mean, obviously they're getting a lot of attention now because they've come into favor, especially with the very wealthy individuals. A lot of large sums of money are being put into these funds. They're kind of colloquially referred to as parking lots. You can put money into these funds that they are reserved for a lifetime. Once they go in, you can't take them out, but you don't have to necessarily invest them in a nonprofit right away. You can gather money. Many people have said to me, I'm using it because I want to make a large gift and make an impact, and I'm gathering or I'm amassing an amount of money in these funds. But donor advised funds have been around for a long time. I mean, if you've had a relationship with your community foundations around the country, they really have been in the business of donor advised funds forever, since the beginning of those foundations. It's just getting more play now because incredible sums of money are being put in there, partly because the IRS really hasn't put the same regulatory restrictions, constraints on them that they have on family foundations and other things. There's no requirement for a minimal payout. I do think that's going to change, but right now it's not. So people aren't forced to make decisions of the moment. They can wait a bit on that.
Okay, Marv, here's a question I'm betting's on the minds of a lot of our nonprofit friends. How do you suggest a nonprofit make their regular solicitation and a COVID-19 related ask at the same time?
Yeah. couple of things. I don't necessarily think that they're two distinct things. I think the integration of messaging and if there are very specific direct impacts to budgets and programs that are the result of this moment, you certainly want to refer to those. But I'm a big advocate for comprehensive asks anyway. Now, I don't think we should be going back month to month, time and time again. I think there is such a thing as donor fatigue. I think you can go back too many times. You have to really pick your moments carefully. I think most of our philanthropists, especially those who are asking to do a lot for us, really appreciate the fact that we come in with a thoughtful proposal that builds in a bunch of things. Now, if you did that and you did it the end of last year or the beginning of this year, because a lot of those are cyclical, or they're on a calendar, this moment, the COVID-19 moment, is kind of new. We didn't anticipate this. It couldn't have been built into those proposals. I think what we have to remember, though, is if we're going to do a specific ask around the coronavirus and its impact on budgets, and I got to tell you, I think the nonprofit world is going to be far more involved for a longer time with the economic impacts of this virus than the actual virus and the toll it's taking.
That's a great point, Marv.
Many of us in the nonprofit world, we deal with economic insecurity, food insecurities, all these things that challenge people. I have 2 projects right now with international relief organizations, and they're very worried about those countries' reliance upon American philanthropy and American governmental support. And if our economy isn't strong, it's going to have a worldwide impact. So I think we have to be ready for those things as well. Yeah. But I think in this particular moment, as long as you can make a legitimate and a thoughtful case for support, I think you go ahead and do that. But I will also say you'll earn a lot more respect from your donors if you continue to appreciate the fact that this is a moment in time. Much of what we're dealing with now is a delay of monies coming in. It's a cash flow problem. For those of you who had spring events with the ability to move special events to the fall, you're going to be able to capture them in your fiscal year. But you have a cash flow problem because you needed the funds in an earlier period. So those are the types of things that we want to keep in mind when we message to potential donors. Sometimes you just want to go to a donor who maybe is more inclined to make a year-end gift, and then ask them if they could speed up their giving by giving in this quarter as opposed to the fourth quarter.
Marv, during my career, I loved unrestricted, use where needed most funds. I thought that each one of those dollars was worth at least 2 restricted dollars.
Right.
So how can let's best make the case for unrestricted or general operating funds?
Yeah, it's getting harder. I mean, the statistics are not supporting the level of importance that those unrestricted dollars have in our world. Even forget about unrestricted, even if they're restricted for operational purposes, that's not sexy and interesting. People always want to fund programs and things that excite them. We have to find a way when we're soliciting our donors to carve out a piece for operations. We regularly do that in campaign solicitations. If we're going to ask somebody for a $100,000 gift and we get them to agree to that, we'll always ask for a 10 or 20% carve out to support the annual fund. The one thing you don't want to have happen in campaigns or in moments like this is for your core operations to fall back. So you have to be careful that you're paying attention to that component of it as you go out there. And much of the asks that are being made, the special asks for the virus and its impact on our communities and the work that we do is centered around the continuation of programs. Well, we have to make sure we take care of people. And some of us are receiving support from the government with the PPP program and the CARES Act. Those are going to help a lot. But philanthropy can be another component of that as well.
Hey, Marv, is it possible to ask for gifts for endowment during COVID-19?
Sure. It's a tougher case because there's an emergency moment right now. We have to deal with this. You can't be tone deaf and you can't be focused on the future when you have imminent things you have to deal with of the moment and in the current time. But the case can be made in those larger asks, more comprehensive asks, that had organizations had endowments, had
Yes.
larger endowments, had reserve funds of 3 to 6 months cash in anticipation of this type of a moment, we'd be in a better place right now. So let's use this reminder of the importance of those funds to build those funds up for the next time that will come along, because it will. This is the nature of the world we live in.
You know, we know that you can never thank the donor enough. What is your advice on stewardship practices during COVID-19?
It doesn't change. This is actually, look, if you're an organization that is driven by special events, direct mail, basic annual funds, some of those things are going to get hit. The impact is of a moment like this. People are distracted. They're not paying attention to messaging around direct mail. They're looking to do, big things. So getting on the phone, writing personal notes. I'm a big fan of handwritten notes. It's kind of a lost art.
I like to call that the magic sauce.
Yeah, it touches people's hearts. My rule is a little different than yours. I know you like to talk about 7 times. My rule has always been you thank someone for every 0 in their gift. If it's $100, at least say twice. If it's $1 million gift, we got a lot more thanking to do. But it also is a great way to engage your board members and your volunteers. Get them on phones, get them writing notes. This is a great time to think about, where we can be tomorrow. And remember, if you have the ability as an organization to view this as an interruption and a cash flow problem, not a lost revenue problem. Now, if you're in the arts and 25 to 50% of your revenue comes from performances that have been canceled, you have some other issues that you have to deal with. I understand that. But for a lot of us, we just simply have revenue cycles that we're not able to meet right now, but we can catch up later on. Hopefully that's more than not.
Marv, you like referring to the 4 distinct phases of campaigns. Could you review each of these phases and comment on a COVID-19 related strategy for each?
Yeah, infrastructure build refers to the mechanisms that have to be put into play. Materials have to be developed. You got to get your parameters about what your campaign is going to focus on and feature and champion. That's a very internal process. That's something that if that's the phase you're in a campaign, you're actually in a great place because your focus can be really laser focused right now. If you're the lead gifts phase, you're talking to people who you're closest to. You have those strong relationships already established. Lean in, don't lean back. This is a moment, as I've already shared, we've had direct experiences with significant solicitations that have gone very well during this time. If you're moving to a public phase or you're in the public campaign, that's a time where it's about broad announcements, broad messaging. You might want to think about waiting a little bit until people's attention can come back on you as an organization and the special things you're trying to do. But that one you got to measure a little bit. That last phase, contemplation of your future, celebration, those look, we're not going to have much of a celebration right now when we can't gather. So that might have to wait a little bit until we can start bringing people back together. But you can certainly begin to contemplate how the campaign can spur future good things. And I always tell people there are 3 goals in every campaign, whether it's a formal comprehensive campaign or just an internal campaign for the annual fund. You have to pay attention to raising money, which is the obvious one. But at the same time, if you don't use these campaigns to raise consciousness of your profile and the awareness of your organization, and then also build capacity to raise more in the future, you've left a whole lot on the table. So there are things that can be done in this moment that can absolutely continue to advance campaigns. And it's also a great time, if you're not in one right now, but have been thinking about it, get in, because that pivoting thing that we talked about earlier is going to happen down the road a little bit. And you can get through the infrastructure build phase and be ready to pivot fast and get right into lead gifts.
Hey, Marv, give me a fist bump on that. Okay. Hey, Marv, you're doing fantastic on time. So, John, do we have some questions from the audience?
Yes, there's a question here and he said I could say his name, from Tim Farrell.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Hey,
Tim,
Tim.
he's a good member of our learning community.
He wants to know, how would you frame the asks that are focused on the back end of COVID, not the response to it, especially for a strategic pivot for the organization?
Mm-hmm.
Marv and I worked out a deal. If it's an easy question, I'm going to take it. If it's a more complex question, he's going to take it. Marv, the floor is yours.
I'm sure, Jim, you and I agree on this anyway, so it really wouldn't have mattered. Um, I think that speaks to using this time where maybe, Jim mentioned one of the R's was relevance. You have to ask yourself, in this moment where we're focused on a health concern, we're focused on a public safety concern. If you're not in the business as a nonprofit providing direct services within those specific areas, there are people who are going to be on the other side of the philanthropic equation who might say, this is not your moment. But who amongst us in the nonprofit world can afford to go 2-3 months without raising money? I mean, you can only sit back for so long and see the way to other groups. Now, that being said, if you are in a position to be magnanimous, and Jim, you and I talked about, there is an organization out there that actually went public saying they weren't going to fundraise during this time, and they're going to wait for their turn when this is over. There aren't too many of us who can afford to do that, but that I'm sure that garnered them a lot of attention and probably praise. But
I don't think many of the people listening can afford that strategy.
No, of course not. I mean, that was a large national organization, as I recall. I don't remember exactly which one it was. But I think this is the time to think about, where are we going to be in 2 months? What do we bring to the table in this regard? What messaging within the culture of our organization and the people that we serve do we live in that can come out of this moment better? And that's how I was kind of alluding to that earlier in the discovery phase.
Mm-hmm.
What can we discover about ourselves? What can we learn about the way we go about fundraising that will make us stronger and better coming out? Nonprofit strong. We learn from our experiences, and this doesn't have to always be a negative moment. Look at what we're learning. We're finding that Zoom, at least in this moment, is a personal way to interact with people. Who would have thought?
If there was ever a time for board and management and staff to talk about missions and revisit that for relevance and timeliness, this is the time. John, some other questions, please.
It looks like the other questions that you talked about earlier in the webinar, at the right time in the presentation, please address the delicate nature of asking for money at this time when you're not providing direct COVID assistance, and any tips you might have.
Well, we kind of spoke to that, just a moment ago. But again, I don't think there's ever a moment where we're not relevant in the nonprofit sector. We exist because we do things that are so critically important in our communities, however we define community, every single day. And just because we have this moment in time that maybe changes the landscape a little bit, we're still relevant in some way. And get out there, make the case, reflect on who your closest supporters are, where your strongest relationships are, and use this moment to continue conversations. Whether you actually solicit or ask for a gift or simply build more of a cultivation moment, stay busy, lean in, don't lean back.
And I'm going to ask the attendees, I hope you remembered, I want you to type it in. We're nonprofit strong. Please type that in again. We're nonprofit strong. Marv, as we're beginning, we're doing great in time. I got a question for you, okay? I'm knocking on wood. When the COVID threat is finally over, what parts of pre-COVID fundraising will return to the way it was, and what will remain changed forever?
Yeah, It's interesting in a general sense. A lot of this has to do with whether the glass is half empty or the glass is half full. And I shared with you, Jim, the other day that a DJ on a radio station some years ago did a survey, and he asked people to respond yes, no, or maybe. There was no question, just respond yes, no, or maybe.
Yeah.
And
hey, I'm maybe.
there you go. 34% said yes, 33% said no, and 33% said maybe. And that's who we are as people. So you have to understand as an organization, when you're dealing with people, that they come from a mindset. They come from their own personal perspective. And if you've built a relationship with people, you know where they come from. And that's one of the great things about building those relationships. We know people intimately. And so are you going to call up somebody or try to have a conversation with somebody who you know is a half, the glass is half empty person right now? They're sitting home hearing all the negative stuff about this. Vaccines 18 months away, the therapies aren't working, the tests don't work. Or are you going to call the person who says, I'm liking what I'm hearing? USC just came out with a study yesterday that said, LA doesn't have 8,000 cases, it has 500,000 cases. And that most of those people had the virus, that your body dealt with it effectively. They never hit the radar screen, and the actual virulence of this virus is tiny. It's far less than the traditional flu each year. That's good news. Now, I'm sure other people heard that. The negative person heard that and said the test didn't work properly. Here we are undercounting all the negative reasons. So you have to measure the moment and think about who you're reaching out to. And you're going to talk to people who are generally feeling that we're going to come out of this thing sooner than later. We're going to come out of this thing in a better place as a society. We've learned some more things. We've identified another virus. There will be a vaccine someday. So, and our fundraising needs to go down that same pathway. We're learning that virtual meetings are personal. I like you, Jim, I wish I had bought stock in Zoom and Amazon.
Hey, on those comments, give me a fist bump.
Absolutely. But we're going to do more of this. For those of us in major gifts and in campaigns, when we jump on planes and spend $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 to get to somebody to do a personal solicitation, maybe we don't need to spend that money anymore. Maybe if the person is agreeable to doing it this way, we can do it. Now, are you going to plan on doing a Zoom meeting with somebody who's in their 80s who has never interacted with a computer? Of course not. So again, you have to measure all these things and figure out what makes the most sense.
That's right. And by the way, we were talking, this is a great time for development officers to reach out and thank their major gift donors who might be older. And if they're not on Zoom, guide them through, help them, teach them. That will not only improve their relationship with your nonprofit, but improve their relationship with their loved ones, and they will remember that.
Great points. Look how many of us spent Easter together on a computer screen.
Right.
Well,
Marv, terrific as usual. I wanted to wrap up here right on schedule. The late Maya Angelou was a wonderful, wonderful poet. And she said, people will not remember what you said. People will not even remember what you did, but they'll never forget how you made them feel. And so, quite simply, that's our job in fundraising, is to make the donor and the donor prospect feel like they are the most important person in the world to our respective organizations. It's that easy or that hard. Mm-hmm. Wanted to take a moment here to get yourself invited to these free webinars that we plan to do throughout the free of charge, Wednesdays, 4 to 5 o'clock Central Time. You need to be in our constant contact database. We send out a monthly newsletter called Stratagems, and we have to make sure your name is in there, and your name and email at a minimum. We would like to have your title and name of your nonprofit. but you got to be in that database to get invited to these events. I'm proud to say, with the help of my colleague as an editor, I wrote my first book last year. It's called 10 Simple Fundraising Lessons. And I think they apply now as much as, or not even more so as we go through this current crisis.
It should be mandatory reading for every board member.
And by the way, it's only 80 pages. It's 80 pages. We couldn't leave you without giving you a money-back guarantee. Marv, can you say we'll make this a
Absolutely.
money-back guarantee? Your chances of getting way up when you ask. I don't face-to-face, or it's by video conferencing, or it's by audio conferencing, or it's by smoke screens. Your chances go way out, and ask. You work for organizations that matter very, very much, and without fear, anxiety, or hesitation, you should be going out and ask for the gifts that your noble missions deserve. I want to thank John Largent, our producer. Another good voyage. Thank you very much, John. And to my friend and colleague, Marv LeRoy, he's tired of hearing me saying this, but I make two observations about Marv. I'm so glad I know him, and I'm so glad I'm not him. He has provided tremendous leadership and support and guidance to the nonprofit sector from coast to coast for now coming up to like 40 years. Thank you for being such a cherished friend and colleague. John, are we all set from the board?
We are. Everything's good.
Marv, I think we're going to give people an extra 3 minutes to head into their happy hours, virtual or happy or whatever. But I want to thank you again, Marv. How's your family doing?
Jim, everybody's great, and thanks to you. We have a mutual admiration society. I share all those same sentiments about you that you were so kind to express earlier. I also really enjoy doing these. I've had a chance to do 2 or 3 now, both live and in person, and then through this format. You guys do a great job. People should keep tuning in. For those who don't know, Jim wrote a great white paper on fundraising from home. Lots of great stuff in there. It's available on his website. It's available on ours, moremission.com. I learned 2 things about this virus that will absolutely change the way we live our lives. Don't become a good host. These things can't live until they find a human to let them live in. So don't touch your face.
Don't touch your face. Wise words to end on. I want to thank again John and Marv, and I also want to thank our nonprofit partners for joining us today, but also for use to your states, to your nation, and the world. We needed you before, and we need you even more now. And so I have one last opportunity. I would like you to type on the screen. What should they type on the screen, Marv?
Nonprofit strong. When are those T-shirts going to become available?
Okay, we're talking to a printer. But
all right.
I woke up early one morning and said, Angela, let's print T-shirts.
Absolutely.
And she said, Jim, nobody will see them because nobody's going outside. I said, okay, we'll delay that expenditure.
Amazon.
Hey, thank you, everyone. Everyone stay safe, and we're nonprofit strong.
Take care, all. Be well.
Be well.